Man, I think the Jaguars defense has to be lethal this year. And ESPN put out some stat projections and they don't show lethal. I'll tell you why that's something we need to discuss here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. I am the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast. My name is Tony Wiggins. And we are free to subscribe to here on Locked On Jaguars. Make sure you go over to our YouTube page, hit the like button, subscribe button, and then hit that bell so you get notifications each and every time we drop an episode. And then wherever you get your audio podcast, please make sure you tap in to that location every single day so you don't miss an episode here of Locked On Jaguars. Today's episode is sponsored and brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Shout out to the everydayers for joining us here every single day. We wouldn't be the same without you, and we appreciate you and thank you very, very much. You can be an everyday. All you got to do is join us every single day here on the Locked On Jaguars podcast, and you can become an everydayer as well. All right, here's what we're going to do today. At the end of the show, we're going to tie it all together. We're going to recap the Trevor Lawrence. Should they or shouldn't they extend him? There was some more talk about it. I caught a little wind or something. And I'm going to tell you why something about that doesn't make any sense. If you look at the stat projections that we're going to show you in segment 2, ESPN will tell you that you probably shouldn't re-sign Trevor Lawrence if those are the numbers he's going to put up, at least for the amount of money that is being thrown about that he is probably going to get an extension for. So we'll talk about that. And then why in those stat projections, I looked at them, and the defense, I think, needs to be lethal. That's the statement I'm going to make. And I want you to tell me if those stat projections describe lethal. Okay. All right. So here we go. The defense, which is what I wanted to talk to before I saw the little cheat sheet about what they believe and the projections that are going to happen. I think the defense has to actually lead, especially early in the season. Usually when you come out early in the year, we see it in training camp all the time. We see it in a little bit in the preseason, but the preseason is so vanilla that you can't really get a handle on what the reasoning for what you see is. But we see all the time, especially early in the year also, that the defenses are ahead of the offenses. Don't know why. Don't have a long explanation as to why. We can think that sometimes there's usually a little bit more continuity on defense because you're always trying to get weapons for your quarterback. A lot of offensive coordinators get hired, or people on the staff get hired, so you have a lot of you have retention issues that the continuity every single year offensively usually isn't the same. Defense doesn't really do it like that for some reason. So maybe that has something to do with it. For the Jaguars this year, new system, new scheme, new defense coordinator. They are really going to have to be on top of this for this to happen from my perspective. All right. They got a lot of parts. Here's why I think the Jaguars will be fine in that respect, because I believe their team, actually, their personnel is set up to run the new scheme better than it was the old scheme. And we have talked ad nauseum on here before about, we were talking about matching up draft picks and personnel with scheme and making sure that guys are brought into a really, really good system. The old thing that we talked about when we say, bad systems ruin more good players than good systems are ruined by bad players. Well, systems aren't necessarily the coaching. It's not necessarily, it's a combination of scheme. It's culture. It's what's going to be asked of him. What's he going to be asked to do. And sometimes it's coaching, even though I don't think the best coach and the worst coach, that there's that big of a difference, or is a bigger difference as we seem to think. I just think that they have to get off to a quicker start, and they have to lean on Josh Allen and Trayvon. Those guys have to look at it as if they have been turned loose, as opposed to looking at it begrudgingly as if, okay, we got a new scheme. We got to figure this scheme out and all of this stuff. No, I really, really do believe that they have to look at this as, We're getting turned loose, y'all. We're just going to be able to react and play instinctively and get out here and get after people. Now, I know I said the whole defense, and I do mean that, but the defense, to me, it starts up front. It starts in the trenches. It starts in your ability to be active and stop the run. It starts in guys just imposing their will. And I do think the Jaguars, with how they are constructed with Josh Allen and, of course, my favorite, Trayvon Walker, to go along with the addition of Eric Armstead and the resurgence, if you will, of Devon Hamilton, along with some of their depth pieces, I just think that they're pretty much set up athletically and professionally to go out and be really, really dominant up front. If you ask me right now, which is one, would it be a huge surprise if they are subpar? I would say absolutely yes. It would be a surprise to me if they're not in the top half of the defenses in the league, and if that defensive line isn't in the top 1/4. That's right. Top 8. Quarter is 30. A quarter of 32 is 8. Top 8 defensive lines in the league. Statistically, in terms of sacks, impact, and just flat out watching the game, I just believe that there's so much blue sky for this defense because of their personnel, and mainly too because of how they're going to be used. Ryan Nielsen, the alignment, the way that you hear about them teaching all of the little things that are so important for teams to win, then that's why I do think they're going to be good. But mainly, I think they have to be good. I didn't want to ask this question. I didn't want to ask a question, do you think they'll be good? Well, yeah, my answer is yes. No, I wanted to make a statement because they have to be. If they are not good, if they are not dominant, I do believe that that's going to set the Jaguars back, because there's going to, at some point, there's going to become a question. Like right now, if there's a perceived hole on this defense, I'd say it is at corner. And that might not be true. That might just be a perception because everybody and their brother wants to have a new shiny piece at corner. I get it. And I understand. You just can't fix everything all at one time in one off season, right? So, and then when you want to fix something, sometimes it's not available. Sometimes it's not there. So, what I've done is, instead of just talking about team building, I tried to actually put myself into that situation step by step and take you guys on the journey with us. It's not as easy as we make it sound on here and on any other platform that people will talk about. So yeah, for them to be good, the defense has to be good. I think they have a way that they can be good if they approach it the right way. I think the pieces and the parts are there. It's all about how fast they get acclimated to everything. And I think they have the type of people that will try to acclimate quickly to what Ryan Nielsen is putting down. And it seems like from a personality-wise, things match up really, really well. I'm going to take a look in segment 2 at stat projections for both the offense and the defense, because those things have to actually go together. So we're going to take a look at both offense and defense on the projection chart. The projection chart, in fact, was done. I'm going to tell you exactly who it was. I think I just probably, it was done by ESPN, and it shows the projections. Now, of course, they don't take in all things considered, but it just gives you a bit of a baseline as to what maybe the production numbers are expected to be as far as the fantasy numbers and all of those things. So we'll make sure we go over those stat projections here in just a second on Locked On. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by YahooFinance.com. That's right, YahooFinance.com. Man, look, if you're like me and you have had different investments, that's right, investments all over the place. Portfolio here, you got something over here, you got a self-employment savings plan on this side, but you kind of need all of those things in one spot for you to be able to monitor them correctly. And there's only one place where you can do that, and that's YahooFinance.com. That's right. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind great investors, every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the number one finance destination, producing holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customized customizable charts, and so much more. Make sure you tap in to yahoofinance.com, the leader in the industry. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination. All right, segment 2 here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. Thank you for making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars. We were talking about the defense and how they have to be lethal. That's right. That's the word I used. I used lethal is one way of looking at it. Stats don't always tell the whole story, right? They don't always tell the whole story, but they do tell a pretty good portion of the story, right? So I was looking here at ESPN. What they did was what's called a stat projection. Now, I'm sure that this was fantasy football based, and it's probably a little bit of a whole bunch of guessing because nobody has seen anybody yet, right? And I'm sure they don't really take coaches into consideration, but ESPN does a good job at some of these things. So I thought it'd be a good idea for us to talk about it and see if those stats line up with exactly what you were thinking, that might be that thing that you need in order to be, thinking that your team is going to be the team that you all think is going to be. All of the fan base, all of the Locked On teams right now are probably sitting here going through the schedule thinking about who they're going to win, who they're going to lose. I told everybody I got to wait to officially do that, but here we are. So let's look at the defense since we talked about the defense earlier. The defensive statistics, let me look at the stats from last year, the Jaguars stats from last year, because I want to do a comparison between this year and last year. So that's going to take me just a second here. But all right, we got the regular season stats for the Jaguars, and we're going to compare them to what they said that the Jaguars are going to be able to possibly do this year. Trevor Lawrence, on the heels of the contract extension, which we'll talk about more of that in just a second here, or in a few minutes in segment 4. Trevor Lawrence is expected to get almost the same amount of yards, but there is something I did notice about his stats that I believe will make you believe that he's going to play a little bit better, and that is the completion percentage. I think that goes up just a tad. But heading over to the defense, I just talked about them needing stats. How about 42? They're projected to get 42 stats and 13 interceptions, right? So you guys know last year the Jaguars, what they did was they really put a lot of emphasis when they came out of camp. They put a bunch of emphasis on creating turnovers. That's exactly what they did. They put a bunch of emphasis on creating turnovers. And early in the year, when they were actually winning, when they were 8-3, the Jaguars were like top 3 or 4 in turnovers. Once those turnovers subsided, yeah, we have to go to that. Once those turnovers subsided and they were no longer coming at the rate that they were coming at before that, that's when the Jaguars were less opportunistic. And then you saw some of their warts on offense. So, yeah, that's how it goes. So last year, the Jaguars had 40 sacks. And folks, pretty much, even though they had the top duo in the league, everyone and their brother said, they ain't enough, man. No, they need more. They need more. And they had 16 interceptions, which most of those turnovers that they got actually came early in the season. I don't think that's enough. I think this number that they have here, this 42 sacks, 13 picks, I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough for it to tell the story that we all want to be told. Sack-wise, individually, they got Josh Allen with 10.6. We're going to round that up to 11. They got Trayvon with 8. So both of those guys would take a step back. And then you would have Eric Armstead with 5.8, according to their list. That's 6. We're going to round that up. I still don't think that feels. They got Travis Gibson with 2.5 sacks. Let's round that up to 3. I don't feel like that's enough. Just for informational purpose, the fourth edge here is Yasir Abdullah, and he taps in with 1.7, which is 2 sacks. But they give him 193 snaps. So you got 300 snaps for Travis Gibson. About the same for both Josh and Trayvon, which is 837 and 859, respectively. Then you get to the corners. Ronald Darby is projected to lead them in interceptions at 2.3. It's not a lot, man. It's not a lot. So, yeah, that's where they are defensively. That doesn't sound like the defensive coach for Aloha Khan has another 159 tackles. Devin Lloyd chimes in with 137, according to this. It doesn't sound quite as overall dominating as I described in the first segment that this defense needs to be. And, I'm glad I was able to tell y'all organically exactly what I think they need to be and what I think they can do and possibly will do. And ESPN disagrees with it based on their stat projections. But I'm not going to, it's all for good and all for fun, but this is not like something that you're going to sit here and hold on to and think that, oh my God, the world is falling apart. No, it's not. We're going to do some offense here in just a second. As we look at some of these stats, I want to do Trevor last, but I got to do it first because he's the quarterback. 15 games, that means he'll miss 2. That means Mac Jones plays in 2 games. Mac Jones has 70 attempts, 47 completions, 500 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. That sounds like they probably would have won one of those at least. Trevor Lawrence, 15 games, 535 attempts, 348 completions, 3,755 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 12 picks. So, I mean, when you think about his stats from last year, they weren't overwhelming. They weren't terrible. Completion percentage probably could have been up a little bit higher. It was 65%. It's probably right where it is right now. Same amount of attempts almost with the same amount of completions, less yards, 1 less touchdown, and 2 less interceptions. If Trevor Lawrence has a year like that, people are going to still be saying he ain't worth the money. Unless he has a year like that and the Jaguars have all these rough rushing yards or something and they win all these games. So let's look at the rushing yards. Travis Etienne, 954 yards rushing. That would be his lowest total in his career here, if you don't consider the first year since he was injured that first year. Tank Bigsby with 300 yards. So they got 1,500 yards rushing for the entire running back core. And then 300 more for Trevor. 25 more for the wide receivers. In terms of the wide receivers, let me just go ahead and mention that to you right now. Christian Kirk is the leader of the pack in games, 15 games for the top 4 or 5 guys at the receiver core. Nobody plays all 17. But Christian Kirk had 118 targets according to these projections with 79 completions, 899 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Brian Thomas Jr. is second in, actually, the same amount to Evan Ingram. I can look down at the tight ends, 87 catches. So you have a couple of guys with around 80 receptions, 87 for Ingram, 79 for Christian Kirk. Nobody over 1,000 yards. They'd have Evan Ingram have 787 yards according to these projections. Then you have 2 other guys with 800, and Gabe Davis would be 3 yards away from 800 yards. 6 touchdowns for Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis leads the whole pack. 5 from BTJ, and then 4 for Christian Kirk, and 3 for Evan Ingram. Brenton Strange here has 12 catches for 118 yards. So that folks will still think if that happened, that Brenton Strange won't be a big contributor. But even these numbers are a little bit pedestrian, but I would have to ask myself if these numbers are always that pedestrian when they're making these projections. I don't want to make too much of it without actually knowing that type of research. But I will tell you this on the surface, if those numbers do pop up, that doesn't sound like the Jaguars had like this great season. Sounds like a middle of the road team to me, right? Doesn't sound like anybody's an MVP. Doesn't sound like anybody's going to the Pro Bowl or being all pro or any of that stuff. It just sounds like they were just out there playing and trying to get it all figured out, right? I know y'all trying to get it figured out too, because I'm always trying to do it. But are you watching Fox Sports and ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume? With all that shouting, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to try to put a recap real quick on the stats, but then I'm going to close the door for once and for all, well, at least for this week, on Trevor Lawrence. I'm going to give you a quick recap. I'm going to tell you why some of the arguments against and for Trevor Lawrence absolutely make no sense. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. So, yeah, Locked On Jaguars here. Tony Wiggins, host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, where it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen, as always, here on Locked On Jaguars. So, a lot of talk this week about should you do Trevor Lawrence? Should you re-sign Trevor Lawrence? Should you re-sign Trevor Lawrence? Should you do this or do that? And I gave my explanation that I would, but it does not mean that I'm without some trepidation. And that trepidation would be, I get why people think maybe you need to wait, because I said that you need to wait. But I also believe that even if you wait, if you get, let's just say you get the exact same performance from Trevor Lawrence, I think they're going to pay him. So I don't think he's going to get worse, right? The reason why I say go ahead and pay him, because even if Trevor plays the same way he's played the last 2 years, that's going to warrant him getting paid. It's going to warrant him getting paid by their standards and by the standards of having this real hard time finding a quarterback for 27 years. That's just what it is. And a lot of the way they feel about Trevor, it's because of the way he moves around and the workflow and how he moves about his business every day. And they're close to him, and a lot of other people aren't. Somebody I got a lot of respect for, Dan Orlovsky, though. Dan Orlovsky he's standing tall. He's standing in the paint about his opinion about Trevor Lawrence now. He ain't waffling. He's telling you exactly how he's supposed to, how he feels about Trevor. He says he loves him. He likes him. He just hadn't quite seen enough to give him that big money. And there are a lot of people that privately feel that same way. I do. However, whether somebody deserves something because of certain benchmarks they've hit in their career, or whether or not the timing would suggest that it's better to give it to him now, those are two different things. Because he's not a bust, that's for sure. All right. But what it is there's this never land that if you listen to these arguments, and you'll find yourself there if you pay attention to it, and those arguments themselves will describe the dilemma. And I'll go through it real quick. Orlovsky says, you know what? I wouldn't give it to him yet. I'd wait. There's no rush. You got fifth-year option. You know, he's in year 4. You got fifth-year option. You can wait until you see more, because it's a big investment. I'm totally on board with that to a certain degree, and I understand it. But here's the flip side of it. Orlovsky then says, and I'm not quoting him, I'm paraphrasing. He says, and if I'm Trevor, I wouldn't want to sign that deal if it's under 50. I think he basically thinks Trevor's going to play well. So the thing for him is, right, and this is very, very important. The thing for him is go out and perform and play this year, then make him come see you with the bigger money. All of that sounds good. When you look at everything in a fishbowl, it all sounds like that stuff jives up together. But let me tell you why it doesn't. If Trevor says, nah, don't pay me, I'll wait. And the Jaguars, if they took your advice, would say, nah, we ain't going to pay you. You can wait. Inherently, that is an issue. Because you got one guy that is willing to bet on himself that $48 million ain't enough. He's going to get the 50. He's going to get the 51 or 52 or whatever, right? You got a team that says, okay, go ahead. Do it. Show it to us. Prove it. At some point during a courtship, whether or not you should re-sign a player or sign a player, one of y'all ought to want money, and the other one ought to be trying to say, hold on, let's wait. And the other one should be pressing. It sounds like to me that if both Trevor's side as well as the team took this advice that I keep hearing, that both of them would actually agree. So I keep asking, what are we debating for? Why is there a debate when, if the best thing to do for the Jaguars is to wait, and then the best thing to do for Trevor is to wait, then there's no impasse. They're good. Everybody is on the same page, right? Wrong. Because that's what we say. And I wouldn't let 50 million, I wouldn't let that number be Oh, I can't take it if it's less than 50, if it's 48, unless you're looking at it from the standpoint of you don't have the luxury to do that because it's your turn and you have to do what you're supposed to do for the CBA and for the rest of your players. You wouldn't be up to 48 if somebody took that attitude and said, you know what, I'm not going to get everything I can get. You can give a hometown discount, or I'm going to do this. It said it doesn't work like that. There's a responsibility that comes to you because your agent has other clients. And folks will be like, man, why are you turning the water off for everybody else? Because the water's on for you like I don't know what. And the reason why it's on for you, you can get 48 because somebody argued for 44 and 45 and 46. And somebody before that argued for 42 and 42. Don't be the dude that slows this down. So you have to understand, people have to know that this stuff does factor in. And I get it. But inherently, if the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence are both saying, let's just wait, let's see how it plays out, then there is no impasse. There's no problem. And it doesn't sound like there's a problem now. Trevor's here. It seems like both sides are working towards getting it done. And, you know, the way you work towards getting things done is to not actually get them done at first. That's why it's called work towards getting things done. I think Trevor's going to take it. I think if they offer Trevor 48, he'll take it in a heartbeat. He'll take it as fast as I would. And you know damn well if they offer me $48 million, I don't know what they're going to pay me to do, but I take it. Because it's all about the structure. It's all about the amount that's guaranteed. It's all about cash up front. There's a way that you can do this without actually looking for a certain number. But I just find it funny that when I hear people arguing on both sides, they're both saying the same thing. So that would tell you that there is no real impasse or there is no real obstacle in terms of the negotiation if everybody's going to feel the same way. I don't know how y'all feel, man, but I love Locked On Sports Today, man, because it's launched and it's the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every angle. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Until you guys get to the point where they're winning all the time, there's always going to be these questions. And what level, at what point, and that's what I want to go over too. I want to talk about that tomorrow. At what point does winning get comfortable enough? Anything short of a Super Bowl, does winning get comfortable enough for fans to finally get the bad taste out of their mouth? We'll discuss that. And then a whole bunch more on Locked On Jaguars. Make sure you check us out every single day. It's your team every day. Man, we are always here making sure that you are our first listen. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, you guys make sure you take care of each other. We will make sure we take care of ourselves so we can meet again here on the Locked On Jaguars podcast network with yet another show. So hopefully you understand that the defensive projections from ESPN are just that right now. They are projections. If they work out the way that they want, it's going to be hard for us to make sure we put that and frame that in a way that we want our season to go. But then Trevor Lawrence, I don't think there's an impasse at all. And even if it doesn't get done, I think everybody's still on the same page. All right, man, you guys take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time here on Locked On Jaguars.